Hey now, and welcome to Quantum Drive. I'm Rob.
I'm Katie.
And our ongoing mission is to discuss every episode of the Orville.
Today's episode is from Season 1, Episode 4, called If the Stars Should Appear, written by Seth MacFarlane and directed by James L. Conway.
Before we get into the episode, we have another review to read.
Oh.
If you would like us to read one of your reviews on the show, all you have to do is go to Apple Podcasts or iTunes and write a review there, as well as put 5 stars for your rating. We're not going to bother with anything less than 5 stars because, I mean, this is a 5-star show. So our review today comes in from Wizard Web, who starts by saying, a perfect companion to the show. This is one of those rare podcasts where I don't just listen and am entertained. I want to be in the room discussing it too. Some great points of view that give honest praise and valid criticism where needed, and fun facts along the way. Loving it.
That's an awesome review.
It's a great review.
Thank you, Wizard. Is Wizard Web?
Wizard Web.
I like that. It's a good description of what we're doing. It's just talking about stuff, and I'm glad people enjoy our conversations about it.
Same, yeah. I mean, we would talk about it anyway, but we appreciate that you guys are listening and leaving us those wonderful comments. So thank you very much. Keep in mind, other ways to get in touch with us. If you would like to email us with questions or comments, you can email quantumdrive@thegeekgeneration.com. If you'd like to contact or follow us on Twitter, that's at Quantum Drive Pod. And if you'd like to join our Discord and talk with us about the show there, you can go to thegeekgeneration.com/Discord. Before we get into the episode discussion, Katie's got some trivia for us.
Oh boy. This episode was interesting because it was more philosophical, so I found some cool stuff about this episode. Like I had mentioned in a past episode, that this episode was supposed to be the second episode of Season 1.
Yeah, and I think it shows.
See, they said it was because it performed poorly with test audiences. I will say I liked this episode better than Episode 2, Command Performance.
Way better.
And the reason I bring this up again is because in this episode, you see Dr. Finn treating Yaphet, and Yaphet's still persistent and kind of trying to woo her, and she seems unfazed by it, when in the last episode, she was pissed off about it. And so I just thought it was interesting, the contrast, because she just kind of seemed more tolerant of Yaphet. When in the last episode, she's like, get out!
Because of the switch, they didn't build that up properly anymore. So that should have been the first interaction of that. And then the next one where she's really annoyed is him trying again.
The music used when the away team enters the bioship is from Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of neat.
I don't know what the licensing on something like that is, but...
I mean, maybe... Well, they have so many Star Trek tie-ins. Maybe they got some special
maybe.
deal.
Or maybe they have a background music cover band. I don't know.
They just have a band that plays... Yeah, I don't know. The quote recited by Dr. Finn, which also serves as the title of this episode, is from Nature, an essay by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it's in reference to his essay, which is from 1836, on the philosophy of transcendentalism.
Oh, I didn't know what it was about. That's interesting.
Yeah, so if you're curious and want to Google, look up transcendentalism.
Cool.
The episode has similarities with Star Trek, the original series episode For World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky, where an asteroid is set to collide with a Federation planet and is found to harbor an alien civilization that has forgotten its ancient, advanced past. And the asteroid is in fact a generation ship.
That's cool. I'm not familiar with the TOS, most of the TOS premises, so this still felt fairly original to me, even if it was inspired by that.
Yeah, fun fact about me, I haven't watched the original series either. I've seen little bits. So, I mean, I just through and through Next Generation is where it's at for me, but I'm going to try to work through Voyager and Discovery and all the other seasons that I need to.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'm missing out on that. Isaac asks the bridge crew to explain the meaning of the word dick, However, Alara used that word in front of Isaac in the episode Command Performance. This continuity error arose because the episodes are out of order.
Sure. Yeah. There's another thing. And I think we'll get to them in the episode itself, but I think there are certain conversations that happen that definitely should have happened earlier in the continuity of the show that take place here instead.
I agree. Now that we'll talk about it later, but thinking through the episode, I'm like, oh, this would have worked better as a second episode.
Yeah.
While inside the bioship, the ground team wears Duralian spots around their face. But when the team enters the bioship bridge, their spots are gone.
Yeah, I made a note of that too. And it's not just the spots. It's their clothing has completely changed.
Oh, really? I didn't notice that.
Although, which part are you referring to? Because I'm thinking about they change into the Duralian clothing and have the spots to go into the city. And then when they're going and finding that hatch to go to the bridge, then those spots are gone and they're back in uniform.
Yeah, that's what I like. When they're heading to that bridge of the bioship is when it all. So I guess maybe they just changed out of it. That was something that I thought was notable.
I assume they did, but it's very abrupt.
Yeah, it was abrupt too when they went to the city center and all of a sudden they're like, and in my head I was like, wait, my headcanon was trying to be like, did I miss a scene or something to fit those? Yeah. The vessel in distress is the USS Druyan, named after Andruyan. Am I saying that wrong?
I don't know. I don't even know who that is.
Okay. Wife of Carl Sagan and co-writer of his book Cosmos.
Oh, so nice nod to Sagan.
I know. Yes. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
The bioship is based off of Ridley Scott's 1979 space thriller Alien and its spaceship, the Nostromo.
Nostromo, yeah.
Nostromo.
I can totally see that.
And so Luke McDonald, he's the visual effects supervisor of the show, said, the ship is 100% based off the Nostromo. I absolutely adore that ship. The Orville is very fluid and organic, and the bioship is supposed to be 2,000 years old. It feels like that kind of Nostromo hardcore, little bits and pieces as opposed to the sleek, vacuum-formed look of the Orville.
I think that's a good choice. I think it works as intended, yeah.
The bioship Capitol building scenes were shot at the Disney Ranch in Santa Clarita. But something notable about this, there were 120 background people, and according to the costume designer, all their boots were custom made and their clothing aged.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that would take a lot of work for 120 extras.
Yeah, I'm wondering where all of them were. Because, yeah, there's the mob that he incites outside, but that's the biggest crowd we see, isn't it?
I think so, but I'm guessing there's people milling about, and probably I think the whole sequence with the Capitol building, there's probably a lot of extras that I'm always focused on the main actors.
Same.
Which is terrible because like all this like attention to detail is going on in the background.
But it's supposed to be background though. That's the thing. Like if it felt weird, we might not know why, but the reason that it feels fine is because they're doing all that work.
So those are my fun facts, and I found some fun guests that were either hidden or a part of this episode.
Yeah.
The first one, I think it's kind of obvious, but Liam Neeson.
Who's that?
Liam Neeson, who is that? He is Dural.
Yes.
We see him at the end. So if you didn't know, that's Liam Neeson.
And he has a McFarlane connection.
Wait, tell me. I missed that.
He was in A Million Ways to Die in the West.
I haven't seen that movie, but I want to see it. I just never got around to it. So I actually didn't know he was in that. And Seth MacFarlane's sister, Rachel McFarlane, is the voice of the computer.
Yeah, and she does a lot of voices on his cartoons and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that. I love that he's one of those guys that just likes to use his people over and over.
Yeah, I like that too. And another example of that is Max Burkholder, who plays Tomlin.
Mm-hmm.
I know him from Parenthood. He played Max Braverman.
Yep.
But he's also voiced characters on Family Guy, American Dad, and The Cleveland Show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see him in things here and there. And he's definitely getting more little parts like this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then my last guest is Robert Knepper. He appeared in Star Trek The Next Generation, episode Haven, as Deanna Troy's betrothed.
Yes, Wyatt Miller. I remember that. That's the one where he's painting or drawing pictures of this mystery woman.
I just think I love that there's Star Trek intertwined in this show.
Absolutely.
Even in like all the little ways.
And Robert Knepper was in an episode of Star Trek Voyager the episode Dragon's Teeth as a Valdwar, I don't know if I'm saying that race correctly, Valdwar soldier named Gaul.
I need to watch Voyager so I can see his cameo.
He's under heavy makeup, so you wouldn't even recognize him, honestly.
But now I know, and I can look for it whenever I come to that episode. And so those are all my fun facts, and those are all the guest stars that I thought were interesting from this episode.
Fantastic. Well, let's hop into the episode. We begin with Clyden waking Bortus to try and discuss being neglected. Bortus gets up to get ready for his shift early, so Clyden gets some ice cream and sits down to watch The Sound of Music, apparently starting in the middle of the movie.
Yeah, I for a second I was like, I've seen The Sound of Music a lot. That was the one VHS set that my grandparents had, so we watched it all the time when I was a kid. We'd go to visit Granny and Granddad and watch The Sound of Music, which is like a 3-hour long movie. But it is interesting because Clyden is like, give me what Commander Grayson said depressed people eat depression food. And then he gets Rocky Road and he sits down and he says, play a movie that'll make me happy. And it starts the Sound of Music. I mean, would you say it's a happy movie?
So I certainly would not choose The Sound of Music for something to make me happy. But I have seen some trivia on Seth MacFarlane that at one point he referenced it as one of his favorite movies.
It's a great movie, and it was one of the few movies that my granddad actually loved. But and maybe as a kid, like, it is more upbeat than it is down. But it is interesting that it started halfway through the movie.
It is a little odd. Also, this scene ultimately has no connection to the rest of the episode in any way whatsoever.
Was Topa even?
Well, it's shot out of order. So he says family. I don't know if this scene was added on, but he does talk about spending time with his family, but there's no reference of a son or Topa or anything like that. So I don't know if it's purposely vague or if they got lucky and it was coincidentally vague. But yeah, this has nothing to do with anything.
I feel like I enjoyed this scene because there's Bortus and Clyden have the stare down before Bortus leaves to go to the bridge.
That's fun.
The only reason I think that maybe it kind of makes sense with stuff is because Bortus had to take over the bridge command shortly after he got there. But I'm wondering if it's going to... I think it's maybe setting up more of Bortus and Clyden's relationship dynamic.
It's a very early look at that.
Yeah, and so I think that maybe stuff down the road will come into play. But I enjoyed it for the comedy of it. But it was just kind of like like in my head, it's the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And Clyden's like, I would like to talk. And it's like, well, are you both sleeping? I mean, I guess. And then when they get to the bridge, I'm like, oh, everybody else is awake. And then my brain was like, oh, you need someone on the bridge at all times. Right. But yeah, I enjoyed it just because it showed like when you have a fight with your partner, you just eat ice cream and put on a happy movie.
It was a weird way into the episode, but it's a strange opening.
Maybe since we're rewatching stuff too, I've seen stuff in the future, but I wonder if I'm going to see that tie in more clearly now that we're watching it for a second time through. True.
While mapping stars, the Orville picks up a space vessel larger than any they've encountered before. I found it was weird that the ship is so large, and they go right up to it.
Oh, yeah. Like in the book that I have, it said the ship is supposed to be the size of New York State, but in the show, Dr. Finn says it's the size of like New York City. But the ship, like the Orville's dwarfed when it's next to it. Oh, yeah. And it is like, yeah, you would think maybe they would scan it a little more before they just approached it at such a rapid speed. Oh, yeah. But maybe they did scan it and they're like, oh, maybe there's no weapons on it or something.
That's also possible. Actually, I don't know why it would have weapons. Like, that would be incredibly difficult to destroy.
Plus, it's like maybe 2,000. Did they know it was like 2,000-year-old tech?
Not yet.
When they first... So, yeah, I guess at the time, I don't know. Maybe they're just ballsy. And they're just like, we're exploring. This is what life's about. And they're just going for it.
They find out in the next scene, upon further investigation, they discover the ship is nearly 2,000 years old and that the engines no longer work. It's traveling on inertia alone. Also, if its path continues, it will collide with a star in about 6 months.
So maybe that's why they pulled up so quick, because they're like, oh, it's dead in the water, essentially. And so they But I mean, my thing is like when they were in the zoo, the Caliban Zoo, they thought everything was great with that, and they just went full bore into that. So I just kind of feel like maybe that's another reason, like the out of order-ness of the show episodes shows a little bit more, because I think they would have learned a lesson from Command Performance.
Yeah.
Based on just approaching a giant ship that's 2,000 years old.
They show a bit of reckless abandon.
But it's like, it's kind of their style, I think.
Yeah. I think that's just the way the Mercer likes to play it. Just like, fine. We're good.
Yeah, it'll be all right.
An away team of Captain Mercer, Commander Grayson, Alara, Dr. Finn, and Isaac take a shuttle and dock with the ship. They have a coincidentally easy to get in dock that doesn't seem like it's much of a problem. As they enter the interior, they discover that it's a bioship which contains an entire ecosystem. They also realize that their communications can't penetrate the hull, so for now they're out of contact with the Orville. The team splits up into two groups to explore.
Even before that, Yaphet sexually harassed Dr. Finn again.
That's
Just
true.
want to point
That's
that
true.
out.
And she took it a lot better this time because, timey-wimey.
Yeah, he was just kind of like super like, oh, let's get sloppy back. And I'm like, that is so inappropriate to say to like somebody just in general. But yeah, so Dr. Finn got out of that because she had to go on the away mission. They said the jar of pickles line again.
They did, which I'm sure you loved.
I may or may not have rolled my eyes. But yeah, so, can you open this jar of pickles? But when they were crossing the bridge, once they entered the ship, and the height and everything, do you think those were apartments? Or like, what do you think was that just like...
Across the bridge?
Well, when they were crossing the bridge, like they were along the walls, there were like those lit up things. In my head, I don't know if I'm just trying to do some filling in the space. Like, was that just, life support, or is it like, it looked like apartments to me.
Yeah, I kind of thought of everything from the outside of the ecosystem to the hull of the ship, kind of like a buffer space.
Yeah.
Like that's the ductwork. Like they're going in the walls to fix the house, in my opinion.
Okay, that makes more sense, because in my head, I'm like, is this like apartment buildings, and then they have the BIOS dome when you get into there, like that's where you can go hang out during the day. But it makes more sense that it's the walls.
Yeah, I assume there's kind of like a bridge crew, then there's an engineering crew that would be like in the walls. We're just call them the walls. In the walls, kind of fixing and maintaining everything. But then the bulk of everybody is actually inside of the bioship part.
But here's the thing, nobody was out there, and they got lucky that stuff lasted.
It's a little odd that they would have ended up in the situation that they did. I don't know how.
It's not so far-fetched, but like obviously things got them there.
Yeah. At some point, they stopped bridge duty.
Yeah, but that's the thing too, is like they're just kind of like, I don't know, they got lucky is all I'm going to say.
Insanely lucky, yeah. Ed, Dr. Finn, and Isaac are walking through the woods when they come across a cabin. On the way, they have the conversation about Isaac asking Ed about his divorce with Kelly, which was 1,000% a conversation that should have been in a second episode, not after we've seen two other ones in between, because this was kind of answering a lot of the questions that the first episode brought up, like what happened, how did they feel about it, and 4 episodes in, that stuff is nowhere near as important.
Yeah, I remember when I was rewatching their conversation, and then when they cut over to Alara and Kelly, their conversations too, I was like, this is a lot of like, it's weird that they're talking about this now. Yeah. And then, knowing that they're out of order, it makes a lot more sense. We learn a little bit more about the Kaylon, like how they quote unquote reproduce. Yeah, it just seemed kind of like awkward conversations to have like 4 episodes in. Like at that point, the crew's been through so much, like it just seemed like odd small talk.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the same time, it kind of worked because you learn more about the characters. It does help with that. And I think it's easier to overlook. If this was like episode 10, I'd be like, what?
Yeah.
But since it's episode 4, it's kind of not too far off.
Definitely remnants of the switch, but yeah. They knock and introduce themselves, but are fired upon by one of the inhabitants, who Isaac stuns. When they enter the cabin, they find a woman who seems to be confused by the information they present, as well as her son, Tomalin. When questioning Tomalin, Isaac deduces that the inhabitants don't seem to realize that they're on a spaceship.
I mean, I really enjoyed the part, like, Isaac shot his dad. The dad came out guns blazing with, like, an actual, like, pump shotgun or something like that.
Ed had a great reaction, too, just like, holy crap.
Yeah. And he was like, wait, he just stunned him, right? Like, I thought that was really funny because I was like, what if they just killed the dad?
Right?
But
like, nobody told Isaac not to, but he must have some sort of protocol.
And I asked myself this question in my head, and then they answered it right away. I was like, do they have their phaser set to stun? Or do they actually kill people? And then that's when Ed had the whole, like, you had it on stun, right? And I was like, oh, okay. Because in my head, I was like, they can't just be killing people left and right on this. Like, but I loved the mom because she was just so taken aback. I thought her reaction was perfect to what was going on. Tomlin was so chill about all of it.
I think one, because he's younger and and because he's a reformer, he's already willing to accept the new ideas.
He's like the rebellious teen. And I enjoy the thing when the mom was like, you shut your mouth with that blasphemy. And like, it made me laugh really loud. But I just like how Tomlin was like, peace, mom. I'm going to go show these guys around.
Right.
Like, literally just left his mom to deal with the stunned dad in the yard. Like, just, all right.
She's probably freaking
all right, Tomlin.
out. Meanwhile, Kelly and Alara are also discussing the divorce when a vehicle arrives and asks them for ID. When they're unable to provide any, they shoot Alara and knock out Kelly, taking her with them. Okay,
I have a few things.
Sure.
Alara's insecurity is really interesting to me because she's talking about, it's not really working out with Josh because he doesn't like that I'm stronger than him. And it seems to me like they're alluding that she's got a crush on Ed.
I got that impression as well.
And I just thought that was a little weird because she's like, the captain doesn't seem intimidated by my strength or whatever. And it's
not the person you want to talk to about it.
No, that's what I was going to say. Like, it's Kelly, his ex-wife. And I picked up on the fact that she was kind of alluding to like, I got a crush on Ed. But also, can we talk about how Alara got shot? She's the security officer. Like, she started approaching them. Granted, you don't know how people are going to react, but they had guns on them. And why would you start walking towards them?
I mean, she did kind of go in a motion of, hey, let's, and then boom, like out of nowhere, they shoot her. I don't think she was crazy out of line like she has been before.
But why wouldn't they take Alara with them? Like, they just shot and she just rolls down the hill.
They left her for dead.
But, like, she's still an outsider.
True.
Like, wouldn't you want to make sure, quote unquote, the job's taken care of if...
That's a fair point.
So I just thought that was interesting. But the whole thing that I took away from that is, like, she's definitely got a crush on Ed and she's talking to the ex-wife about it.
Yeah.
And it was
either that or she has some daddy issues and looks at Ed as her father, giving her praise.
Yeah, that could be that. And the thing is, again, it was like another conversation that would have fit well with an episode too.
Back on the Orville, a distress call is received by a vessel under attack by the Krill. Bordis launches a communications buoy and takes the ship to help out. I liked the forethought of using a communications buoy like that. Because I don't think that's something I've really seen before.
No, I don't. I think that's an important thing, and it makes sense for if they have to go deal with the Krill, that they wouldn't just leave nothing to the away team. I like to point out that Bordis is an amazing. When he takes over, like, he does an amazing job of being in charge and just like handles stuff really well.
Which. I know what you're saying. I mean, we love seeing Alara in the captain's chair, but I think had this episode come before that, it would have made Bordis's refusal to do it that much more infuriating. And it would have made Alara's attempt to go get him much more understandable.
In that context, I might have liked the second episode a little bit more. Just because... Bordis has a cool, calm command. Like, he's dealing with issues. He's not freaking out. And I think, obviously the show is at, like, the episodes were put out of order because of reasons. And, like, I'm now trying to, like, fit it back to be like, this would have been a great episode too, but it's not that way. So, like, watching the show in the order it actually is can be, It's just interesting that that they move stuff around, and I think this would have been a great second episode, honestly.
It's why you don't test stuff and you don't let people tell you what is best for your show, and you just do it the way you want, because ultimately, like, the response to this is, I read that this is the second most well-received episode of this season generally.
I loved the humor in this episode too. It was like a little drier, a little more sarcastic, and I just, on a whole, I thought this episode was really well put together.
As do I. Tomlin brings the crew to a remote barn where he introduces them to the Reformers, a group of people that believe there's more beyond the world they know. They inform the crew that their society is governed through a dictatorial theocracy, and that Hamilak, the first guardian of the Word of Dural, would put them all to death for even discussing the existence of outsiders.
It is interesting, like, the Reformers aspect of the show. What I liked about this episode is it deals with, like, philosophical issues and religion, and the way they approach it is I think it's a very interesting way to approach it. I like that they're like, do you want some food? And the food is obviously disgusting.
Is he the only one eating? Did anyone else get food?
There was, like, really no reason to have that besides a laugh, but I appreciated it because he's like, where's your garbage? And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. It brought some lightness into it, but the whole discussion is about, like, we're in a religious fanatical society and we don't think things add up. And so it's just interesting because even if you're that isolated in your own world on a bio ship, that you're still going to have people with that kind of thought process.
Yeah, totally.
That there's something else out there.
I loved the quote from, I guess you could call him the leader of the Reformers. He says, many people refuse to accept an irrefutable truth simply because that truth puts them in the wrong. I thought that was a great line.
It's just interesting that, like, it's like issues in our world too. It's just like, if you don't agree with somebody, they're going to tell you you're wrong kind of thing. But, like, the free thinking still finds a way in such an isolated community. And also, like, just that I'm thinking over those 2,000 years that there were, like, whispers and rumors of things. And, like, they probably got passed down. And, like, there's probably always been reformers.
The remnants of the truth kind of seeping their way through. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just think that's kind of interesting to think about.
Same. Ed receives a call from Alara, who tells him she's been shot. Tomlin goes with the crew to find her.
Yeah, I like how Tomlin just tags along. I mean, he does know his way around. He does,
yeah.
But doesn't it seem dangerous for Tomlin to be tagging along?
Yeah. Although, honestly, he's probably safer with them than anyone else, really.
That's true. I loved the tech for...
Oh, the medical tech?
Healing Alara. Yeah. Taking the bullets out, and the fact that she only survived because she was Selayan, because of her strength and everything, which I was like, that makes sense. Like, a human would have just completely bled out. But just, I really wish that kind of medical tech was real.
Oh, every time I see a hypo spray on TNG, and I'm like, they don't have needles. I would love that.
I just love where she's just like, all right, I'm going to switch this around and it's just going to heal all your skin and all that. And I'm just like, I just want.
Yeah. You have a broken bone? Let me take care of that. You'll be good in like 20 minutes.
Because I think they've alluded to it. They, like, cancer is not a thing.
It seems like that.
And just, like, I don't know. I just hope someday this is all a reality.
I know,
like,
seriously.
This kind of medical technology.
Kelly is taken to the city where Hamilak is inciting a mob. His enforcers toss a reformer to the crowd, and they beat him to death. Once inside, Hamilak questions Kelly about who she is and where she comes from.
Can we just talk about how, like, they beat a guy to death? I mean...
Yeah.
Hamilak's whole, like, speech, and just kind of... He incites a mob mentality. And then they throw this guy, who is a reformer...
Yeah.
Just because he disagrees with them, and they just, like, literally beat him to death.
It's a crazy scene, but it definitely gets across the point of how much these people are into their religion.
And then he sees Kelly, who's clearly wearing different clothes and looks very alien in a way, and they bring her inside. And I mean, he is the worst kind of bad guy.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't take any responsibility for anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it just reminded me of like the religious, like zealot kind of, I'm better than you.
Yeah, I can't stand the villain that's like, and he says it flat out, I didn't kill anyone.
Yeah.
Do you see blood on my hands? Yet he clearly knows.
He is the worst. He's just the worst. And like he's like the kind of evil that's scary.
Yeah. And it's not even like you can't attribute it all to religious conviction.
No.
Because you could be a religious fanatic and not be a violent one.
Yeah. It's like that power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like a little corruption. And then he uses the religion as a way to justify his terrible behavior.
Yeah. And the way he addresses his enforcers when they show up with Kelly, he has a very like, let's sweep this under the rug type. In that, he's great in this episode, Robert Knepper.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I hate his character, I know it's because we're supposed to hate him.
Yeah.
But I love his performance. In just a little bit of a nod and a head tilt, he's saying, hey, take her through like the back door. Like, I don't want people seeing her, because he knows something's going on and he doesn't want to admit it to anybody.
Oh, he did a great job because I hate his character.
Yeah.
And he conveyed that he is just scum of the earth kind of thing. Because, I mean, yeah, the not taking responsibility, just being like, I didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is just how it is. And I'm like, you're just a bad person and you're in charge. So, and that just was not a happy accident that you were justifying your behavior this way.
The away team finds Alara and Dr. Finn removes the bullets and heals her. Assuming that they'll need backup to rescue Kelly, Ed sends Isaac to contact the Orville. He informs the captain that the Orville is currently away. So this kind of goes against what we said about Ed before, is just kind of going in with reckless abandon. He actually is taking the thought to be like, okay, we could go after her, but we should probably have backup. We need more people.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like they get in a little too deep and then they try to like backtrack a little bit. I will say about the shuttle, they're totally gaming chairs.
Oh, yeah.
I know that's just like, they're like modified. So if you're not familiar with video game culture, there's like specialized gaming chairs, and I'm pretty sure the shuttle chairs are just modified gaming chairs.
I'm sitting in my Orville shuttle seat right now.
They're supposedly really comfortable and they're good for your back and if you're sitting for a long time. But it's silly that's what I'm noticing. I want to talk to somebody who can confirm that for me. Like,
which brand did you get?
Which brand of chair do you have?
How do I get an Orville shuttle seat?
They should do that.
I'd buy one.
I would buy one too.
Please. The Orville and a Krill vessel are firing upon one another, and a maneuver by Lamar allows them to destroy the enemy ship. Boom!
I know. I love John's reaction to this. He just jumps up and I think that's the most animated I've seen his character.
Oh, totally. And I like Bortus's reaction to it. Even though I totally support Lamar's response, I still like Bortus's reaction of, dude, get a grip on yourself. Be a professional.
I mean, we don't know how long of a fight they've had, but it seemed like they destroyed that ship fairly quickly, the Krill.
Yeah. I mean, it probably took them longer to get there than it did to wreck the Krill vessel.
Mm-hmm. It just seemed like an easy battle.
Which is surprising considering the last encounter we saw with them.
I agree. Because, well, maybe this wasn't a battle cruiser, and maybe there was, maybe.
True, and maybe the Orville surprised them a little bit.
Yeah.
Plus, Lamar just had his great maneuver, so why not?
I know, and he had a reaction that was worthy of his great maneuver.
Hemlock has resorted to torturing Commander Grayson for information. Ed, Alara, and Dr. Finn arrive in the city dressed as locals and gain entry to the building where Kelly is being held. So yeah, this is where they show up in the Duralian clothing. They have the alien markings on them. And it is so abrupt that I'm like, okay, they could have gotten the clothes from the reformers, but...
The face makeup is what got me. Because I'm like, I mean, it didn't seem like makeup was worn from the people I saw.
Right.
Maybe it was. But I'm like, did they just take like mud and like spot To the spots?
My headcanon says that Dr. Finn has something in that kit.
Okay.
But I would have liked some sort of explanation. That's a big thing to just kind of drop abruptly.
Like, there should have been like a little transition of like, all right, well, or Tomlin's like, I've got a plan. And then if they showed up, I would have been fine.
Sure.
If Tomlin just said something like that. But I agree. It was a little jarring. And it is one of those things you just kind of go, it's done. It's, but I also wondered, like, clothing I can justify. I can't really figure out how they got the spots to look the way that they did. And
they could have fixed that in a couple ways by either having some sort of an explanation before they leave, because maybe a standard piece of equipment on an away mission is having some sort of a image inducer or some sort of a like temporary tattoo machine.
Yeah.
Or they could have covered that instead of doing the scene with Yaphet. They could have had some sort of plastic surgery procedure going on where we're introduced to some sort of tech that just does that stuff on the fly.
Yeah, I'm assuming one of them had something that, I mean, how they're so advanced technologically that there's got to be something on one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know what, if not, they just probably found some dirt and painted some mud on their face.
And yet still not advanced enough to not have Alara just wear like a headband.
I know. Like, yeah, I was like, I mean, at least they thought of that. They have to cover up that she has alien features.
Yeah, so they could do all the markings, but apparently they couldn't get rid of her forehead ridges temporarily.
Mm-hmm.
The team finds Kelly and stops the torture. Again, another reason this should have been episode 2 is because now we finally get to see Alara being a security officer.
Yup.
I love the scene of her ripping the doors off.
Yeah. And like when she picks up Hamilak.
Yeah.
And holds him up. One of my favorite scenes from this is when Ed walks up to the guard and is like, "Oh my God, Nick!" And like, "How long have you been guarding?"
Yeah.
And then he like stuns him. I was like, that's actually really smart. And what I thought was interesting is when they got to Kelly, she's obviously in a lot of pain.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, they said this is a truth serum. Is it a truth serum because it causes so much pain that it gets people to talk? Or like, because in my head, it was like the Harry Potter-esque, like, this is a truth potion.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to make you tell us all your secrets. And I was like, oh, it's a torture device and it's a truth serum because you're in so much pain.
When he said truth serum, I thought the same thing. I thought she was going to be injected with something that would force her to speak the truth, and then they would freak out when she actually revealed it. But I think they just called it a truth serum because it gets people to spill their guts, even though from a scientific and study perspective, it's been proven that people will lie under torture just to, they'll say what they think you want to hear just for the torture to stop.
I mean, the society is very primitive, so maybe that's part of it. But they have hypodermic needles.
Yeah, that's fair.
I just thought of that. And the fact, okay, this bothered me a little bit, and I understand in that situation, you just got to go with what you got. But the doctor just injected her with that other needle.
Without
like,
even
wouldn't
thinking.
she have, like, what if it killed her?
Right.
Or what if it, like, was more of the truth serum? But now that I'm thinking about it, they had hypodermic needles.
They have cars.
Did they have cars?
The vehicle that drives up to Alara
Oh my God. I
and
didn't
Kelly,
okay,
they
now,
have guns.
Never mind about the hypodermic needle. In my head, I'm like, they had horse-drawn carriages. They did have a car.
I think it's because we were introduced to the society at the cabin first. It makes them seem more primitive than they actually are.
Yeah. They obviously have, it's very much like Earth, but more post-apocalyptic. I guess is the best way to put it. So yeah, they can have hypodermic needles. They have cars.
Ed tries convincing Hamilak that their world is a biovessel headed toward a star, but he resists. He admits that there might be something beyond the universe they know, but he's not willing to allow their way of life to be interrupted by mere suspicions, claiming that his people are not ready. Ed stuns him before they leave.
One of my favorite names is Nice Name. It's not, because it's just the humor in this episode I enjoyed. I don't know if you did.
I enjoyed some of the humor. I love the same scene that you do where he's like joking with the guard about being old friends and stuff. And even the follow through of it where he's already stunned him and he's like, "Oh, good to see you, buddy." And like walks in with him. I love that. I thought that line is so cringe.
Really? I loved it.
Nice name? Oh, just kidding. Like, that's like a 2-year-old's insult.
Because to me, this, again, bringing it back to if it was an episode 2, it would show Ed figuring out how to command and how to be. I guess maybe I'm a 2-year-old, but I loved that.
Yeah.
I loved the humor and like the sarcasm even Kelly had.
Talking about
whole,
her
like,
friends
your mom
at Central Park.
Yeah.
And
yeah. So there's stuff about it where, again, it brings a little more realness to it.
Sure.
I do think it's funny. It's so far in the future and they reference so much from our time, but it's like they try to like push it off as it's the history of Earth.
I've seen some stuff about that Seth MacFarlane has said in interviews and stuff. And the reason that they reference like modern things so much is not really for any canonical reason within the show. It's that if they reference things that we've never heard of, then what good does that serve anything?
Well, it goes back to like how he has Kermit on his desk.
Yeah.
And I love that because Kermit, I identify with that. And it's the same thing. Like I think in the last episode, Kelly quotes, oh God, I
like
want to say
Destiny's
Beyonce.
Child.
Destiny's Child as, you know, one of Earth's greatest writers or whatever. But and it's something too where it's all stuff I know, and it makes sense that they do that. It's just when you really think about how far in the future it is.
If they start referencing artists and shows and movies that are fictional that were supposed to happen between our time and their time, now you have another layer of, well, now I need to explain that thing to the audience so they'll get the reference. And that's just a mess. It's not worth doing.
Well, in the Next Generation, they did stuff like that too.
Sure.
Like Picard quoting
Shakespeare.
Old Shakespeare. And yeah, so it's not that far off. It's just more of a casual, not as old literature.
Yeah, they're not as cultured.
Pop culture versus, I mean, Shakespeare's kind of pop culture, but they did quote Emerson in this.
They did.
So there is some tie-ins, and that was just something I've noticed.
They're
like, I mean, it makes sense now.
Normal instead of refined.
Yes. And you know, Captain Picard was a pretty refined dude.
Sure.
And so which is how he would describe himself, as a pretty refined dude.
If you ask him, he will say he's a refined dude.
So that is something that I do enjoy about this show, is because I'm not a pretty refined dude. I have read stuff like that in college and Shakespeare, but I love this kind of like, I want to see more Kermit the Frog, because that brings me happy, warm memories from when I was a kid.
The Reformers show the away team a metal hatch that they say is a forbidden place, and Isaac opens it. And this is where they're miraculously back in their uniforms and the spots are gone. And again, no explanation.
I wish I noticed that. I think I was making a note while I was watching. This is where we first see Isaac use his fingers to
that's
hack
right.
into something. Or diagnostic the door. Diagnostic the door?
Cyber
Access
hack.
the door panel and cyber hack it. He was a hacker. But I think I was so enthralled with that I didn't even notice that. Also, Kelly's face looked less jacked up.
That's also true. That I think we can explain easily. Just getting
Dr.
to
Finn.
the hatch, Dr. Finn took care of her.
But it doesn't explain why their clothes are gone.
No, it doesn't.
Because when they got to the hatch, were they still wearing?
They're back in uniform.
Or maybe they just had a drive-by wherever the Reformers meet up and changed back into their uniforms.
I mean, it seems like they have a little more urgency than like getting out of the clothing that they're wearing. But
yeah,
it's a strange choice. But
yeah, I think with time limits, and they probably just had. I wonder if there's like deleted scenes and stuff.
Oh, no doubt.
That I would love to see.
Yeah.
But I distinctly remember when they're in the elevator and Ed's being super awkward, that Kelly's face looked a lot less beat up.
True.
She's cleaned up. And in my head, I was like, oh, that's because Dr. Finn treated her. But I totally missed that they had changed back.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I enjoy the elevator bit, too. I thought that was good.
Got any fun weekend plans?
1,000 light years from Earth and you're still awkward in the elevator. Coo.
Yeah, it made me uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's good. The hatch leads to the bioship's bridge, where they access a recorded message from Jahavas Dural. He says that the ship was designed to explore space, but due to their remote location, travel to the nearest habitable planet would take centuries, leading them to build the bioship. On its journey, an ion storm took out the engines, leaving it stranded in space. The ship has been stranded so long that over the 2,000 years it's been in operation, the people have forgotten their history.
He had a very specific set of skills. I'm sorry, I had to.
I would have been upset had you not.
So this is where we see Liam Neeson. If you don't know who he is, he's an actor. But how do you forget? Like, how do you forget all of that?
They do a little bit try to explain it in the sense that in our last 2,000 years, we've certainly forgot about a lot of things.
That's true.
But at the same time, they live in a place the size of New York City.
Yeah.
I think within 2,000 years, the amount of questioning that would have happened within that time, because you live in such a small space, would have led to some sort of conclusion. And also, how did they, I want to know, like, what in the religion explained the fact that there were walls?
True. But I guess the thing is, they were saying, like, it's 2,000 years of enough generations go by that things get fuzzy.
Yeah.
And maybe, like, it's like the Maze Runner, where you're just like, this is my world. Like, I live within these walls.
I want to know what the explanation in their religion was for the walls. Like, why can't we go past this point?
Probably just because whatever they believed in, it didn't want them to.
Yeah, Dural's world doesn't go beyond this place. This is it. This is where you live.
But Dural seemed like such a reasonable guy.
He was.
Like, and so, like, it shows, too, how over time, I think it's an allegory for how religious or anything really can be twisted to whoever has their hands on it.
Totally.
And given to the public or given to people, and how things get twisted over time and how dangerous it can be.
Because there was nothing even in their religion about what Dural's wishes were for these people. It was all just actions being taken in the name of Dural without any, like, Dural hates this and Dural hates that. It was never that. It was just, don't defy the will of Dural. We don't know what that is.
No, it's just like, it's blind faith. And you're trusting the person who's in power, who was Hamilak, to be giving you the guidance. So they think they're doing the right thing, but he's just kind of like a puppeteer, he's just evil. And he's using it to bend people to do what he wants.
He's on a power trip. And now he could have grown up in a way that existed before him, and then that kind of goes down the line. He does say, like, I'm not going to interrupt a system that has kept order for the last 2,000 years. So that he might think that's the only way.
It's just so awful.
He is. His actions are awful. I don't know if he's the worst, because there is a little smile on his face.
That's the thing. It's like, he just, because of the way, the not taking responsibility, inciting the mass hysteria mob kind of mentality. It might be what he believes, but there's just something slimy about him.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not even alluding to the smile while he's doing that, but the smile that he gets just very quickly on his face when the sunroof opens up and he sees the stars. He knows the world's changing, but I noticed just a little, like, up curl of his mouth.
One thing, well, the ship engine only takes 24 hours to fix, by the way, which, you know, I mean, so much technological advances have happened. That makes sense. And Ed's like, we're going to send people here to teach you how to get reacquainted with your ship. You'll take back what is yours, essentially. But the one thing, when that dome opens, I don't think people would be calm. I think people would be losing their minds. There would be mass panic.
Yes.
There'd be mass hysteria. And it wouldn't just be like, wow, it's nighttime for the first time in my entire life. It's dark and there's stars and, oh, wow, this is great. I feel like it'd be like The Purge. I feel like people would not handle it well.
I thought, I'm glad you used the phrase mass hysteria, because I literally wrote the same thing. Like, would these people not interpret this as a godlike event, like it's the rapture or something, and just start freaking out?
It would be like looting and just everybody was so cool, calm, and collected. Maybe part of their religion teaches them that someday this would happen?
Maybe, although we're seeing a very isolated portion of society in this moment. So who knows what the rest of these people did?
Because I feel like Hamelak would be also freaking out.
One would think. And yeah, that's where I notice him like not only calm, but like a slight smile.
And I feel like the reformers, even believing that things could be different and there's something out there, they'd be scared too.
Totally.
I would be scared.
Terrifying.
Like, in our world, if all of a sudden we have night and day and all of a sudden it's just day all the time, I think people would be like kind of weirded out for a while. But I think people start panicking. But to have something where it's day all the time and then it opens, like your sky is opening up.
Right. Like, who took all the light? Like, dark is scarier than light is.
Yes, that's true. My example's awful. But like when it opens up, I would feel like my sky was being destroyed and I was going to be sucked into this black vacuum.
Why would you not think that?
So that goes back to how it's a little bit more primitive. Mm-hmm. And I was also like, they don't have night. Like, how do you, I mean, you adapt to that.
He literally
says,
stuff. What is night?
Yeah. And my immediate thing was, this is not how it would go. But perhaps these people are more stoic and they're panicking inside.
Yeah.
But I just feel like it was too much of a drastic, like, hey, they have a sunroof. Let's just open it up with no regard for how they might react to this. Yeah, it
was a little brazen. We get the quote from Dr. Finn, the one that you mentioned earlier. If the stars should appear once in 1,000 years, how would man believe and adore and preserve for many generations the remembrance of the city of God?
One thing that I wrote down that is if, like, because you did mention he smiled, but did Hamelak believe his own BS or did he know?
I think I don't know if he honestly even cared. I think he saw it as a way to keep order, and it didn't really go farther than that for him.
But the thing is, now his whole dynamic with the group changes. He won't be in power anymore.
Oh, yeah. That's going away.
So maybe because the outsiders were there, meaning the crew from the Orville, people were more open, or whispers about how there is a space beyond what they have. There's a sky, and I don't know. I had trouble reconciling the fact that they all just were so like, wow, it's the sky.
Yeah, same.
So one thing I will say about them is like their like markings look like cheetah marks to me.
True. It actually reminded me of the Trill.
The Krill?
No, the Trill from Deep Space Nine.
I haven't seen Deep Space Nine.
Have you seen the cast of Deep Space Nine?
Yes.
So Jadzia Dax.
Oh, it does.
She has those spots along her.
I wonder if it was like kind of a little bit of a nod to that.
That's what I'm wondering.
Whoa. And it was like there were specific places that they were, but definitely on the temples. And
they had like more on the forehead than a Trill would, but that kind of like side spotting, very similar. I feel like that's a direct nod.
Yeah. I've loved seeing the different alien races and interpretations. And so, I don't know. I think it's a difficult thing to come up with. And I've just liked what they've done with all of that so far.
The last thing that happens here is that Ed tells the reformers that the Union will send a crew to train its inhabitants to control the ship. And they thank him for giving them a future, because this does ultimately save everybody. That's kind of the only justification I think you can give Ed for the decision he makes, is like, these people are dead in 6 months if their mentality doesn't change instantly.
Yeah. I mean, that would be a good justification for opening the dome and just being like, maybe they even were like, this might cause mass hysteria. And maybe it did. And we only saw, like you said, a sampling of the population. And there were just people losing their minds, like if you panned the camera left. Yep. And so the line that stuck out to me was, they gave them back their future. Tomlin and the leader of the reformers dealt with being on the bridge and like seeing all of that very well.
Yeah. Again, I think any of the reformers group are much more open to this idea of the beyond. And especially in the fact that they're in the presence of the Orville crew, Like they've already accepted, okay, there's something else out there. So then getting kind of the reality almost confirms probably rumors and suspicions that they've had.
Yeah.
Okay, then. What's your big takeaway from this episode?
I love that they delved into some philosophical issues, and we did learn more about some of the characters. While it may have been a little out of order, I still got to learn more about them, and I personally I thought the humor in this episode was a lot drier, and I really liked that. And I'm a very sarcastic person, and there's a lot of sarcasm in this, which I appreciated. I don't know. Overall, I really liked this episode, and while it may not have been the most action-packed or had, like, crazy things going on, I thought it was a very thoughtful and interesting concept to be dealt with.
Agreed. Yeah. I love the premise. Like you said, it's an interesting thing to explore, a society that's literally forgot its origins. And it was smart to use the fact that it's drifting towards the star as some like sense of urgency. Like, this is why we need to help these people, and we can't just leave them alone. I do really wish this had been the second episode, because I just don't like command performance at all. And I think this would have started off the series in a much stronger way. And I fear that there were people that maybe bailed on the show after episode 2, that where if this had been the second, they would have hung in knowing what they were ultimately going for, because we don't get a good philosophical question until episode 3. So if they had done that right away with episode 2, then it would have showed the audience, oh, okay, they're not just here to crack jokes. They're exploring these other concepts too.
Yeah, I would have been down if this was episode 2, because I know we always talk about how a nod to the Next Generation or any Star Trek series, it's like that philosophical issues. This one was lighter than About a Girl, but it was that same kind of away mission, dealing with another culture and what they're going through, and how the ultimate goal is to help them and then figure out how to help them in the best way for them. And then plus there was a lot of good exposition, just learning about different characters' relationships and who they were. And I wish they had stuck with the original order, because I think the first 3 episodes then would have been so strong.
Agreed.
And I feel like I wouldn't be as critical of the command performance episode.
I was wondering that if this had been the second one, would we have viewed Alara's behaviors differently when she had already been presented as a competent officer in this one?
Yeah. I think I would have been a little more like, all right, let's dig into why she's acting like this. But instead it was just, I don't know. And it's just interesting because they changed the order of things. And now, I mean, obviously hindsight is 2020. Sure. And we're going to obviously have different opinions than other people will. But it was a strong episode. And I fully support that this should have been an episode 2. And I wish that whoever the test audience was just didn't get it.
They were wrong.
They were wrong.
As far as Ed's final decision goes, I'm not sure that I can fully support it, even though he did do it to kind of save their lives and like shock the society. He took a massive shortcut in shocking them into accepting a new truth, but didn't consider the consequences of what he was doing and taking that shortcut. The thing that I think we really missed out on that kind of bummed me out, that's kind of the Star Trek-y thing to do, would be to sit down with the crew and really talk about it. I really would have loved to hear that conversation debating whether or not this was a good idea. Like, he makes that decision in a split second and says, open it up. We have the option. Open it up. Why wouldn't we? Well, I don't know. Let's talk about that. That's a great conversation that I feel we were robbed of.
Yeah, I have to think part of it is runtime.
Oh, totally.
And limitations. And like a lot of the crew was there. And so it may have been one of those, obviously, sometimes we have to make our own headcanon that we fill in the blanks. And clearly the society dealt with it well. They didn't freak out.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe a newsletter should have been passed around saying like, hey, just so you know, and like let that marinate for about a week. Have the reformers who are more open to those ideas start. But in a way, if they had waited it might have been worse.
It might have been.
If people had time to think about it, and those who were like, this isn't true, this is all lies, and like maybe caused more problems. So, I mean, maybe in some ways what he did was the right thing. It just...
There was always a lot of what ifs, for sure.
Yeah. But from what I saw, it clearly worked out. The society dealt with it well. And so I think that's part of like where you take that peace, like peace as in PEACE, the peace of mind that it's, oh, this is fine. It's all okay. Like, it worked out. Because if they wanted us to think that the society didn't deal with it well, there'd just be people screaming and fires in the background.
Which actually would have been kind of funny.
I mean, it would have been. That would have been a joke, but it would have been a sad joke. So, they don't really, they do have, sometimes they have those sit down discussions.
They do sometimes. I just wish they had done it here. I would have loved to see it because we got a lot of that in the third episode. And that was some of my favorite stuff in that one.
Also, if this was an episode 2, people would have been like, Liam Neeson's in this. Like, it would have been, I feel like, I'm sorry, this would have been a good episode 2.
It would have. I also wonder if they could have just gone an alternate route instead of opening the sun doors. So what if they had completed the repairs and they taught the reformers how to run the ship separately from the rest of society and didn't make society aware? And then they could have left the decision of what to do to their society instead of making the decision for them.
That's also a good thought, because this was like a decision forced upon them. But they did see how the society... Yeah, it's that whole morality thing. They beat a guy to death in the streets. Right. You know, I think part of it is... It's like that whole culture thing where it's like who has the right to decide what's best for them.
Apparently Ed does.
Yeah, apparently Ed Mercer can make that call.
It also, though, made me think if the Union has any sort of prime directive.
They haven't alluded to anything like that.
No, they haven't. And I'm not sure. Here's the other weird thing. I'm not sure it would apply here because the prime directive is usually to not kind of make yourself known to a society that hasn't achieved space travel. But they're a society that forgot that they've achieved space travel. That's such a weird loophole if that's the case.
Also, okay, if we're going to really break it down, when they found the ship, they should have contacted
the Union
headquarters and been like, what do we do with this? Like, maybe go check it out. But I honestly think there's probably some protocol. Mm-hmm. But maybe this is how they do, like, you come across something, you don't have time to wait on a response. You got to figure out. And I think the urgency of the fact that there may have been, or they were going to collide and die. So there was let's investigate and see what, but it could have been so dangerous. It could have been so many different things. So I guess all of it is very much like a what if.
I mean, Ed definitely lean towards the side of let's do what we need to do to make sure these people survive. And you got to give him credit for that. I do feel like he did some things in the process that our Captain Picard may not have liked and maybe would have liked to see him try to do the thing to save everybody while still protecting their society's way of life and not interfering with their natural evolution in a way. But obviously, this is a different structure. And I know none of this, I don't think, argument happens had we not seen the structure of how Starfleet functions.
Yeah.
So I think that, we don't know necessarily what the Union's take on all of this stuff is. So maybe those, like you said, those procedures don't exist here. And it is up to the captain to kind of make all those choices.
I think there's just a lot that we're allowed to kind of fill in, which I do like because it's a brand new universe. While it has similarities to things that we love, like it's making its own way. And I think in some ways the show is dealing with some tough issues. And I think by showing how the people reacted when the dome opened, it's meant to be like this was the right call. Like kind of so the audience can walk away going, oh, that was the right thing to do. Because I mean, I bet sometimes it sucks with the limitations on time frames for shows that are on like cable and networks and stuff because they only have like 43 minutes to tell the story. And I'm sure there's so much that I would love to have seen in it, and like all the like the deleted scenes. Like I would have loved to see the costume change kind of thing, because I love that kind of storytelling. But at the same time, I'm more willing to be like, all right, I get it. You only have 43 minutes to do this. I'll let it slide.
Yeah. And ultimately, it ended up being a good episode, even with all those kind of questions and concerns. I still enjoyed it and thought it was one of the better ones we watched so far. Granted, we're only 4 episodes in, but it's definitely one of the stronger episodes so far.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode, and I'm excited for the next one.
Yeah, but before we get out of here, we have one more thing to do, because Katie's husband is also a huge fan of the show, and it's time for Mark's 1-sentence review.
Oh, it's cool if the farm boy wants to go wander around with the aliens. Nothing bad ever happens to farm boys.
Quantum Drive is a production of The Geek Generation. If you like this show, be sure to check out our other podcasts on the Geek Generation Network at thegeekgeneration.com.
If you'd like to support the show and get access to exclusive bonus podcasts along with other perks, you can visit our Patreon campaign at thegeekgeneration.com/support.
You can follow Quantum Drive on Twitter at Quantum Drive Pod and me at TheRobLogan.
You can follow me on Twitter at PlayKatiePlay and on Twitch at Katie Peters Plays. And Katie is spelled Katie.
Please rate the show and write a review on Apple Podcasts. If you do, we may read your review on an upcoming episode.
Finally, questions and comments can be sent to quantumdrive@thegeekgeneration.com.
We're out of here for now, but we'll see you soon in
the future.